Excel Language School. A real passion for learning.
Hi, I'm David, and I teach here at the Excel Language School. I teach the writing class at a Wednesday evening, and today I would like to talk about IELTS Task 1 writing. Now, in case you don't know what that is, the IELTS has a writing part, and you have 1 hour to do 2 tasks, right? And the tasks are called, the essays are called Task 1 and Task 2. And the first essay, the first task, should be about 150 words long, and the second one should be about 250 words long. And again, you have 1 hour to do all of that. And the scoring is a little confusing because the first essay only counts for 1/3 of your grade, and the second essay counts for 2/3 of your grade. And so we recommend, because of that reason, that you spend about 1/3 of your time on the first one and 2/3 of your time on the second one. So today we're going to talk about Task 1. You spend about 1/3 of 1 hour on that, or about 20 minutes writing this essay. Now, in my class, I write my own questions for my own IELTS test questions. I don't copy or cut and paste test questions from the internet. Now, it's more work for me this way, but I discovered when I went to the internet and copied test questions, some students, they would take out their phone in class and they would look for the question and then they would copy the answer. And I didn't think they learned a lot that way. Now, some people think that copying and memorizing models and examples is the way to study. And to look at some models and examples, of course, can help you. But to memorize a lot of them and hope that you will be able to use one on the test is really a bad strategy, right? Especially because the people who mark the exam are trained to spot memorized answers. And especially, I believe that they also may have computer software and the internet, so they can check to see if something has been copied and memorized, right? And so if you see here, this is the bottom of the IELTS score sheet, and there are some boxes where they put in some information if they want to give you a penalty, and one of them here says memorized. So if you give a memorized answer, they might tick it and you will get a lower score, all right? So in short, don't rely on memorized answers. You must write it yourself. Now, as I told you before, I write my own questions, and I use charts and graphs that I find on the internet, often on a website for a news magazine. And this is an example that I used in a recent class, right? And so this is the chart, and then the question says, you should spend 20 minutes on this task. The chart below from 2017 gives information about food trucks in selected US cities. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. And you have to remember to do 150 words, right? And that is the suggested length, 150 words. If you write over 140 words, that's okay. But I have seen research on the internet that shows that the highest scores are given to students who write a little more. So I usually recommend that my students try to write 160 to 165 words. Now, before we start, in case maybe this isn't familiar to you, I just want to show you, this is a picture of a food truck, all right? And food trucks are really popular in America, where I'm from, and I know they're popular in England and Australia also. And a food truck, if you can tell, it's like a mobile restaurant. And I haven't seen them too much here in Hanoi, right? But maybe you have them now. So let's start talking about the essay. This essay here is a very good essay, I felt, and I gave it either 6.5 or 7. So let's go through it together. Okay, so let's start with the first paragraph, and that paragraph starts with the word "the chart compares." Now, you will see on the first line, the student has misspelled the word compares, and I want to take this opportunity to talk to you about the importance of good handwriting on the IELTS. Now, most people write things on computers now, but on the IELTS, you must write this essay by hand. So it's important that your letters look like the letters they're supposed to be. Your O must look like an O, and your A must look like an A. Okay, and so at the end of the first line, the student uses the word namely, and then lists the 7 cities that appear in the chart. And the student has used this word namely 100% correctly. They use it when you want to say 100% all of the letters, all of the cities, all of the countries that are in your chart. In this case, right, after namely, you see the student has written Portland, Austin, Seattle, San Francisco, Boston, New York City, and Chicago. And so those are all of the cities, so namely is correct to use there. Also, it's possible to use the connecting word for instance, right? If you are going to say all 7 of 7. Now, I just want to say for a second, if you are not going to say every name on the list, you don't use namely or you don't use for instance. You should use for example or including, right? If you're only going to name 2 or 3 examples out of a long list. So in class, though, you see I put parentheses here, and in the class I encourage students to use these parentheses. Now, parentheses, also sometimes called brackets when you are learning about them in school. So I encourage students to use parentheses instead of the word namely, right? And I think it makes the essay a tiny bit clearer, and also the grader can see that you know how to use this sort of punctuation correctly. Okay, so let's move on to the second paragraph, and this is the paragraph the student starts with the words, "Overall, it is clear that." Now, my Vietnamese students love this phrase, "It is clear that," "It is obvious that," "It can be clearly seen that." They really like to use it, and this phrase is used correctly here, but I'm highlighting it because it shows the student used it correctly in order to refer to the interpretation of the data, right? But sometimes some of my students like to use this 2 times, 3 times in an essay, and I advise students really this construction, "It is clear that," "It is obvious that." You shouldn't really use it more than once. You use it 1 time, and it shows that you understand it and you know how to use it. Right? So in the second line, you see that the student got confused about tense. The student wrote rise in the present tense, and they should be using the past tense rose. Now, let's move to the last sentence of the paragraph, which I rearranged a little. The way the student wrote it originally was fine. It was clear. It wasn't the way a native speaker might write it, but it was okay. One of the reasons I rearranged it was after the student wrote 2016, the student used the word we. And I discourage students to use we or I in task 1. It shouldn't be about you at all. And so I think that students should not use these words in task 1 when you're describing the data. Right, and on the last line, the student had problems. They left out the definite article, and just to make clear, the definite article means the word the, right? And this is a very difficult grammar point for Vietnamese students, especially because you don't have anything which is quite the same as the word the in Vietnamese. So this is something that students should study very carefully before they take the IELTS and before they do IELTS writing. Okay, so moving on to the third paragraph. This paragraph starts with from 2005 to 2016. Now, in the first sentence, the student writer uses a very tricky bit of punctuation, and they use it correctly. And so this punctuation is called colon, right? Colon, C-O-L-O-N. It's 2 dots, but don't call it 2 dots because that's not its name. It's called colon, right? And the student shows that he or she understands how to use this. And so that's something, if you can do it on the IELTS exam and it seems natural, it will help you get a higher score, right? Because even native speakers have difficulty with this bit of punctuation. And so you will see in the next sentence, I once again strongly recommended that the student use parentheses to gather into one group the 3 cities that he or she is talking about here. All right, so moving on to the last paragraph, which starts with the words in Portland. You see I wrote up in the corner, make your paragraphs clearer. One of the things you must do when you are writing an IELTS essay, task 1 and task 2, is you must use paragraph form and show the grader that you understand paragraph form, right? And so all of your paragraphs should be either indented. Indented means that the first word is pushed over a little bit, or separated by 1 line, or both. Okay, so I recommend that students separate their paragraphs by 1 line because it makes it easier to read, and then the grader can know that you definitely mean to have a new paragraph here. So the student uses some good vocabulary in this paragraph. They use the verb fluctuate and adverb dramatically very correctly. However, the student used the adverb dramatically twice, and I recommend that you don't use that adverb more than once in a paragraph. If you do, it's not a terrible thing, but try not to use the same word more than once in a paragraph. And so if you can't think of a substitute for like a word like dramatically, just omit the adverb because the sentence is still 100% grammatically correct without that word. Okay, so in conclusion, I'll just repeat that I gave the student a 6.5 to 7 on this. And that's one of the highest band scores in the class. I tend to be a very hard grader. I give some lower grades than perhaps other teachers because I want to motivate all of the students here at Excel Language School to try harder. Okay, so thank you for watching. My name is David from the Excel Language School, and I hope to be back soon with another YouTube video about IELTS writing. See you again soon.
Excel Language School. A real passion for learning.